didn't want me to do this, but I think it's appropriate. Mr. Hurt spent $100 to get the shelter, and really, as a result of the crowd, we moved it. So I feel, and you can ask him, I already gave my $10, but I thought there would be 10 families that would be willing to give $10. So, Mr. Hurt, could I get you at least to stand up in the back? Raise his hand. So, the guy in the green, I know he says that, but I think it's the right thing. So if you feel so compelled, if you would slip him a $10 bill or whatever you can.
We only need 75. We're taking the key back, so we'll get 25 back. Hey, I'm a politician. I saved you 25 back.
All right, so we only need 7 families, 7.5 families. All right, so we've just been trying to get a lot of the technology things going to make this the best presentation for you all. So in just a moment, we're going to pray, and then I'm going to turn it over to Miss Hannah Montgomery. So if we could just pause for a moment, and if you're covered men, if you'd uncover, at least while we pray. So let's pray. Father, we do thank you, Lord, for your goodness. And Lord, a lot of people went to a lot of trouble to research and study and learn about this curriculum. And Lord, the devastation that it could play on our community. And so, Father, I pray, God, that you'd give these ladies wisdom. I pray, God, that we would listen attentively. And Lord, that ultimately that you'd get the glory for it. And we pray in Jesus' name and for his name's sake. Amen. Miss Hannah.
This is the second time in a week you've got me to speak publicly, and it's one of my biggest fears. So welcome, everybody. I would have dressed nicer if I would have known that I was going to be talking. So I had a teacher reach out to me today, which isn't uncommon. I've been talking to teachers. I've been talking to the opposition, per se, or if you would say. And the common thing is that everybody kind of wants to get to that same destination. We just see different paths to get there. And I wanted to share with you some of the things. I'm going to kind of read through some areas verbatim, but I'm going to leave out some points just because she wanted me to keep out her name, and so I'm going to respect that. So she said that she noticed that we were having a public meeting tonight, and she wanted me to go over a couple points. She said, we've not been asked to teach anything yet. She emphasized yet. The school is correct in saying that we aren't teaching it. For now, that is true. I don't think that we'll ever be asked to teach this stuff, but it will be slid in through clubs like BCTM, which means bring change to mind. I'm getting shaky. You need to take a breath. She said that she would like to see volunteers from our community, just good people that need to make those connections with students. She said that we're never going to have what she would call a curriculum to follow, because curriculum equals proof. They will never put it in writing. It will be snuck in slowly. She asked me if hold on just a second here. Let me go down here a little further. And this is a great start, isn't it? She said, I think the administration is smart enough to know not to purchase or use a curriculum because teachers would oppose it. They try not to use that word in school, the CRT and curriculum, etc., because that would obviously be ruled out in a rural community. The biggest question as a teacher, we, the school, say that we do not plan to teach this, that it's only a professional development. My huge question is, why are people wanting professional development and training from a group that those ideas that we do not plan to implement, why are we putting that in and sending our teachers to these trainings if we don't agree with the people that are, proposing it, which is the AASA. She said, I'm praying that you guys get this overturned. I think that the school board may reconsider if they focused on the training and professional development and anything that goes along with them being taught this as a group. She said that the superintendent didn't say any lies in the Q&A. However, she said that they really need to consider the training that the admin and teachers get from this group. If we disagree with the group as a whole, why are they going to the trainings and then coming back and training, why is the administrator training us? So even teachers are having questions about why we're associated with them. So I'm going to turn it over to Heidi. She's got, the PowerPoint and...
We have a couple videos to show.
A couple videos.
Okay, first I want to say thank you to Pastor Kim for letting us use his building today. This is a lot nicer for us than to have to be out at the shelter house, so thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I also want to say, in case I forget, Linda Bedwell and Bill Bedwell made 25 copies of the PowerPoint, so we are going to upload it to YouTube, but if you don't know how to use technology, there's hard copies up here for someone that may want one. Also, I want to agree with Hannah that I think that a big part of this is going to be through professional development, and I wanted to say that Dr. Goad actually, I'm assuming, is in DC right now. She's actually at the AASA conference right now. They have a national conference in DC this week, and she also attended the national AASA conference in February, which was in Nashville, and she also is, I believe she took 8 people with her to the one in Nashville, and I'm assuming she probably did the same to the one this week. And then also she went to an ideal cohort, which is another thing that the AASA puts on a few months ago. So it sounds to me like they're very involved with the AASA. Let me turn on my clicker here. Okay. All right, so I actually had a mom reach out to me a few months ago, it was early May, I think, whenever she saw that Linton-Stockton had become a lighthouse district. And she had looked through it and just noticed some red flags in some of the language for becoming a lighthouse district. So it says, just going to read this, it says, school systems are to serve as beacons of light in the holistic redesign of American education, and they are to serve as thought leader practitioners that are implementing bold, actionable steps on behalf of the broader education community to learn from and learn with as they have taken on the challenge of Learning 2025. The time for action is now. Schools must operate as the heartbeat of the country we want and believe in. A country where freedom, justice, opportunity are extended to everyone without question, qualification, or exception. The recent pandemic has given us an opportunity to finally reshape schools to meet all whole learner needs for maximized achievement. We're calling on educators to seize this opportunity to realize the vision of holistic school redesign. So this was part of what came out that Linton-Stockton put out from the AASA. This is their announcement for becoming a lighthouse district. Okay, so there's a report that the AASA put together, and it's a 33-page report, and it's all of the different components that are going to be, that they're suggesting schools implement to become a Learning 2025 district. And Dr. Goad is saying that they're not going to be implementing the entire thing. There's 3 components. One of the components is the culture component, and it says in here, and I will show you, that to become a lighthouse district, you absolutely have to implement the culture component, that it's foundational and they consider it essential. It says right here, public schools must serve as pillars of anti-marginalization and systemic equity. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here. Okay, so this is actually page 13 of the report. It says, providing robust learning experiences and joyful spaces for all learners, it must involve anti-marginalization curricula that support young people in their development of anti-oppressive understandings and practices. They must develop and implement an anti-marginalization curriculum for all learners. The curricular units of study, the case studies and projects must be inquiry-based, involve original research, fieldwork, and collaboration with experts, and require learners to synthesize learning from multiple disciplines. The units must be developmentally appropriate and touch on multiple forms of oppression, including race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and disability. So what I want to show is this is page 13 of the report. It's a 33-page report about what you have to do to become a Learning 2025 2025 district. And then there are 120 some schools in the entire nation that are Learning 2025 schools. It costs $14,000 to become a member to do the Learning 2025. Linton's, and so that was implemented last fall. Dr. Goad paid $14,000 so that Linton could become a Learning 2025 school last fall. From those 120 schools, they chose 13 schools that they felt were implementing much of this program, and they were chosen as lighthouse schools to lead the way for the rest of the nation. So the $14,000 was last fall, and then we were chosen as a lighthouse school from that. Okay, it shows right here, all of this is right off of the AASA website. It says right here, key components for Learning 2025 design. It says right there, the culture commitments of whole learner, anti-marginalization, and future-driven are considered foundational and therefore essential, allowing for other key components of social, emotional, and cognitive growth to flourish. So what they're saying there is that there's a will, and I meant to put it on here, there's 3 components, that the culture component is absolutely essential. They have to implement that part of it. And I have here, this is actually the application that Dr. Goad had to fill out for the district to be a Learning 2025 district. And I circled there, it says, please describe system progress in the box for culture 1, 2, and 3, plus any others you would like to share. And it shows right there, there is a bullet next to those 3, because those are the parts that she had to fill out. So she had to fill that out to become a Learning 2025 district. And I will say that she sent us the application, and we cannot find in the application where it talks about the anti-marginalization, and there's a page missing. And I'm not accusing her of anything. I don't know how the page got left out, but there's a page missing of the application, and there's nothing in the application that she filled out about that part of it, the culture component. Okay, so I'm sure most of you, unless you've looked it up, you probably don't know what an anti-marginalization curriculum is. So you can Google it yourself. I took this right off of Google. Anti-racist educators must recognize how dominant narratives perpetuate marginalization. Curriculum explicitly addresses power and marginalization. In anti-racist classrooms, humility and courage drive dialogue among students and educators that expose the hidden and visible ways racism manifests in individuals and society. And then everybody keeps asking me, why do we keep going to this school in Ithaca, which is it's in New York, state New York, and this man, Lavelle Brown, he is the superintendent of this school. So whenever I was trying to figure out what an anti-marginalization curriculum was, I went to Google and said, what are examples of anti-marginalization curriculum? So this school popped up in Ithaca, it's Ithaca City School District in New York. This man is the superintendent of that school, and if you go on your computer and you look it up, you will go to his school website, and there will be examples of anti-marginalization curriculum. I did not realize until a few days later that he is one of the commissioners that wrote the report that Linton is implementing. So there's 27 commissioners that wrote the report, and he is one of those commissioners. And a lot of the commissioners are superintendents. Some of them own businesses, but some of them are superintendents. So I just showed right here, those are the commissioners, right there at the top, AASA, Student-Centered Equity-Focused Education. So I just highlighted his name to show you that he is one of the commissioners that wrote the report. And there is the will right there that you can see the components and the culture component. I put this in there. It says Champions for Equity to receive AASA Humanitarian Award. Lavelle Brown will be recognized at the AASA's 2022 National Conference on Education. He wrote a book, and his book is Cultivating Cultures of Equity and Excellence. So if you type his name in, you can find where he speaks all around the country. He speaks at schools, he speaks at conferences, he does webinars, he speaks everywhere on cultivating equity. Here he is in a webinar, though. It says Leading for Equity, Cultivating an Anti-Racist School District. And so he's talking here along with others at a webinar, and you can go find the webinar if you would like to look at it. And they're talking about how to cultivate an anti-racist school district. And this is the same webinar. Sorry. This is the same webinar, and he's talking about characteristics of white supremacy. The reason The reason that I show that is because I just want you to see that this is his mentality, and he helped write this report for our school, and he goes around and speaks about it all over the country. Implementing an anti-marginalization curriculum, and here's, I think this is the video I wanted to show. It's just a few minutes long. Let's try it one more time.
We have a vaccine for COVID-19. In this episode, we talk about the vaccine for hate. My name is EJ Carrion. Welcome to This Week in Education, where every Monday morning I highlight innovative trends, topics, and districts in education. As Americans, we're not just enduring a health pandemic, but a racial pandemic, real to deadly hate crimes and violence. Responding to the moment, districts across the country are accelerating the implementation of real instruction and conversations that will change their school culture around race, equity, and inclusion. The goal is to build anti-racist school policies and curriculum that are sustainable. Just last week, the California State Board of Education ended its years-long debate on Thursday, becoming the first state to approve a statewide ethnic studies curriculum for high schools. The curriculum will guide how the history, struggles, and contributions of Asian, Black, Latino, and Native Americans, and the racism and marginalization that they have experienced in the United States will be taught to millions of students. Other states have taken different approaches to teaching ethnic studies. Oregon is developing ethnic studies standards for their social studies curriculum, while Connecticut high schools will be required to offer courses in Black and Latino studies by the fall of 2022. The course materials in California's new ethnic curriculum includes 33 lesson plans which schools are not required to use but can pick from to fit their student communities. More than 3/4 of California's 6.2 million K-12 students are non-white. Education is the vaccine to combat the virus of hate. So in this episode, my guest, Lavelle Brown, Superintendent of Ithaca City School Districts in New York, shares with us his experience in prioritizing and implementing an anti-racist, anti-marginalization curriculum for all students pre-K through 12.
Lavelle Brown, and I serve as Superintendent of Schools in the Ithaca City School District in Ithaca, New York. Anti-marginalization curriculum units, they're case studies where young people are working in an interdisciplinary way to solve real-world problems that are relevant to their local communities. And the young people have told us the problems they want to solve are around oppression, racism, classism, sexism. So we built out units of study that allow for young people to do that. We've rethought our classroom and school libraries to make sure we have diverse literature written by Black and brown authors featuring Black and brown people. So everything we're doing to be anti-racist, not just racist. We think about grading practices, we think about our attendance structures. When we look at our data, we've seen disproportionate results. So we are shifting our approaches. How do we grade in a way that's more equitable? How do we grade in a way that's more anti-racist and loving? And we have our educators working each and every day now, thinking through that, which is pushing us to change structures and systems that have been in place for over 100 years. And that's how I work.
Ithaca City School District's anti-marginalization curriculum's learning goals are to help students recognize and respond to the complex issues of identity, diversity, prejudice, and power in learning communities, and be able to articulate how marginalization is constructed at an individual and institutional level. On the district's website, ICSD shares case studies, lesson plans, and resources that are available as guides to districts and educators interested in implementing this kind of work in their schools.
So I know young people, second and third graders, who are who are having conversations about sexism and how, for example, how our local media subscribes to a gender binary, particularly when they're advertisements for toys. And our young people have created new advertisements that are gender neutral and have sent them in to the media to be printed. We have young people who are looking at our equity policy and also looking at our academic calendar and doing an analysis and showing and revealing to us as a governance team, you have an academic calendar that you've approved that only really represents one culture. How can we create an academic calendar that represents the great diversity that exists in our school district? What days do we have off? When do we come to school? Etc. Voting, how do we vote? The history of voting oppression, suppression in our country. What do we do now as young people to advocate for more equitable opportunities for young people and educators and adults to vote? monuments. So again, when you go into our website, you can see the range of curriculum that we built in ways in which we're engaging our young people in these hard conversations.
And I also want to say that we used him as an example because he certainly does have the most examples on his school website, but he's not the only commissioner that helped write this report that has this kind of stuff in his school that he's the superintendent of. There's another one, his name's Khalid Moomin, and he's the superintendent of, I think it's Meridian School District in Pennsylvania, and there's several examples. So these are the people that wrote the report that we're implementing. So obviously it's naive to think that this is not where they're wanting it to head. Okay, so this is off of his website, and I was just going to show you what an anti-marginalization curriculum is. So these are the titles of the curriculums. Did I go back? Did I go too far? Okay. So this one's called Language and Labels, and this is for pre-K and first grade. It says Language and Labels explores labels such as those related to gender, ethnicity, and ability, and helps students understand and talk about their individual identities. They discuss the labels that are used for students at home and at school. Is everyone comfortable with the labels that are used to describe them? Is group language inclusive to the whole class? How do we let people know what labels we are comfortable with, and how do we ask others what labels they are comfortable with? So something that the students did, a poster of non-gendered language that's used to address the class as a whole group. I think we all know where this is going. What's my identity? So you're teaching children to question their identity. Let's see, this one's called Pronouns, Flags, and Feeling Safe for 6th to 8th graders. Pronouns, Flags, and Feeling Safe is a project-based unit that aims to explore the struggles and successes of the LGBTQ community and the ways by which an individual can be an ally for all people regardless of sexual or gender identity. Students explore literature that tells stories of young people who identify with binary definitions and those who don't fit into binary categories. Guiding questions that the teacher would ask the students. Do I have to be a boy or a girl? What's the difference between sex, gender, and gender identity? Why should we care about people who aren't like us? Is freedom a constant struggle? This one is called Why Do I Think This Way for 2nd to 4th graders. It explores the social construct of gender and how society defines gender. Students brainstorm what dominant message our culture tells us about how boys and girls should act, be, or do. Students examine advertisements that are gender neutral and ones that affirm a society's gender bias. Students then create or redesign an ad to be gender neutral. Students follow up by writing a persuasive letter to a toy manufacturer or a store to request that they change the way they market the toy. Guiding questions that the teacher would ask: what is my identity? What are my biases? What are my beliefs about gender? Where do my beliefs about gender come from? And then these are actually, this is actually the work that they did in the classroom. So what does our culture say a girl should be or do? What does our culture say a boy should be or do? Okay, this one's called Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. This one is for 6th graders, and it says they examine local and national issues associated with mass incarceration from the perspectives of social justice and human rights, as well as from the lives of those jailed and the lives of those dedicated to keeping society safe. So this one, I just thought that the guiding questions on this one were interesting. How are racism, classism, and incarceration connected? How does mass incarceration connect to Jim Crow laws in the past? How might policing methods determine who goes to jail? Why have we as a nation failed to realize that equality for all citizens? So they're trying to tie your skin color to incarceration. Okay, so the main word in this is equity focused, and so I honestly didn't know much about this. Equity and equality are not the same thing. So if fairness is the goal, equality and equity are two processes through which we can achieve it. Equality simply means everyone is treated the same, regardless of need or any other individual difference. Equity, on the other hand, means everyone is provided with what they need. So whenever they say equity, they're saying not every student gets the same thing. Students get what they need. But the problem of it is, I got to thinking about this. I used to teach. I used to be a special education teacher before I stayed home with my boys. And equity is something that we've done in the classroom forever. Students don't always get the same. As a special education teacher, we accommodate students. We modify instruction for students. One student may need extended testing time on a test, so they get longer time. A student may need a calculator, whereas another student doesn't. Some students are auditory learners. They may need something read aloud, where other students don't. So equity in the classroom is something that we have always done. We have never given students the exact same thing. We give students what they need. But the AASA is using equity to tie it to the color of your skin. In this context, it is a Marxist concept and does not mean equality, equal treatment of all Americans under the law. It means that the government, including public schools, must treat individuals unequally according to skin color in order to force equal outcomes, which is the definition of critical race theory. Critical race theory and equity are very similar in their ideology and in results. Equity is tied to the term social justice. Equity means equal outcomes, which is very different from equal opportunities. Social justice demands things be taken from individuals in one identity group and given to those in another in order to achieve equity. Individual achievement, character, and responsibility do not matter. So I learned a lot about critical race theory when I started to research this, and it's not really that difficult. It truly just means that if you're white, no matter what you say, you are an oppressor. If you're black, you're oppressed and you're a victim. It says that if you're white and you know that you are racist, that you have explicit or conscious bias. But if you're white and you don't think you're racist, you have unconscious or implicit bias. And that is teaching them not to judge each other according to their character or their hard work, but on their skin color. Okay, I'm trying to remember why I put these up here. These are just examples from the ASA. These are some of their webinars and their conferences that they've done, racism and equity, and these are all examples of systemic racism. Like, if you go Google the ASA, you will come up with example after example after example of them having conferences and webinars and things having to do with racism. Okay, so the AASA has a monthly magazine that they put out. It's called The School Administrator, and there is an issue every single month. And so you can actually get a digital copy online. Just Google The School Administrator, AASA, and then it's a program called Page Turn Pro, and you can digitally flip through every single issue of the magazine they have. They also have a journal that they put out once or twice a year. They have lots of other publications. These ones are actually public for anyone to look up, but they have a lot of publications that are private, and you have to be a member of the ASA or a superintendent to see them. So these are, I just put in here a few examples, and I'm just going to read the highlighted stuff. Examining systems and self for racial equity. A typical day's interactions also reinforce racial ignorance for white students who are denied opportunities to learn about lives different from their own and how their racial identity shapes their experience. A successful approach to combating racism and other forms of bias in our schools also requires examining beliefs. Too often, in the rush to action, this gets neglected. As a result, even with new policies and data systems, inequities persist. Okay, Confronting Racism Together. These are all articles from their magazine. Tools for supporting superintendents in disrupting racism. The hardest part of this is looking inside the community and experiencing it in the same way. I'm telling you, the racism issue is a problem and there has to be a change, but part of that change is taking a piece of your personality and tearing it right out. Many of his colleagues were motivated by the deaths last spring of George Floyd and others at the hands of police and the resultant increased awareness of systemic racism that spreads across the nation. Most of these school leaders grew up in predominantly white communities, though a few came from more diverse places. Either way, they were afforded the privileges of being white and explicitly or implicitly learned racism in their families and communities. In this way, they represent many white Americans as they work to define leadership roles in combating racism that feels authentic and to which they can be held accountable. They also are wrestling with their own unlearning, recognizing their own biases, acknowledging the racism that affects us all by virtue of growing up and living in this country. Examples of resources, this goes out to superintendents. And this is a magazine that they want them to read, because if they want to get to our children, they have to get to the administration first. They're trying to indoctrinate our children, but they have to get to the administration first. So these are resources that they're asking them to read. White Fragility, How to be an Anti-Racist, and stamped from the beginning, The 4 Eyes to Oppression. The deep hearts and minds work of changing racial beliefs and practices means keeping pressure on predominantly white board, staff, students, and parents without pushing too hard or too fast. The superintendent in the opening vignette struggled with being the sole hero or martyr. Others worry, will I lose the support of my staff if I push too hard, or my board, or maybe even my job? Despite or perhaps because these shared challenges, the superintendents in the network are energized. They recognize that racism is a white problem and should be addressed by whites. They want more superintendents, especially white superintendents, to do this kind of work as a way of breaking the cycle and perpetuating systemic racism. I put in a few examples. There was more that I could possibly put in. Now in 2021, with an incredible opportunity born out of the tragic death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many other people of color, we have an opportunity to consider what changes educators and districts should take to empower our youth to envision a racially equitable society. The answer has less to do with our individual failings and more to do with our own curriculum. For a model of curricular reform necessary to create a culturally relevant and sustaining understanding of the world, we may look at the 2002 and the beginning of the Social Justice Education Project. I highlighted that because that's something that you may want to look up. This refers to a style of teaching that challenges systems of oppression. Let's see, with so many lives cut short at the hands of the police, with so many black lives cut short at the hands of police, the current moment is opportune for educators to push their own understandings and knowledge of inequity. Let's see. Social media users began circulating a clip of white Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin kneeling on the neck and killing George Floyd. The video jolted the world. Between May and August of 2020, everyday people hit the streets in protest in remembrance of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, Ahmaud Arbery, and many others. They protested despite COVID-19 stay-at-home orders and social distancing mandates, and in the face of police repression and violent counter-demonstrations led by far-right militias. In the coming years, as COVID-19 concerns subside, the racial reckoning that occurred alongside the pandemic will come into clearer focus. The harm racism exacts on students will continue to linger. There will be no vaccines, mask mandates, or social distancing guidelines for addressing this work. Mitigating the harms of racial inequity will require the implementation of racial equity policies and the application of racial equity learning. I'm not going to read through all these. This was just something else I wanted to put in there. So they're pushing for a new, something new to be taught in classes. It's called media literacy or news literacy, and it's teaching students to tell fact from fiction in the news. So they're saying truth decay. We have truth decay in the country, and so they're wanting teachers to start teaching fact from fiction and how students can tell fact from fiction in the news, and I just don't think that belongs in public school. This is just another example. Teaching fact from fiction, news literacy. It's just something I want parents to keep an eye out for in the classroom, because on the next, it says the idea that public education must play a central role in sustaining our democratic system is older than the republic itself. And I think it's on this page, yes. So they're kind of encouraging, even if it's not state policy yet, and it's not part of state curriculum, they're encouraging teachers to go ahead and start teaching this in their classrooms. It says the final point and key is that it allows news literacy to be taught immediately, often without lengthy state-led review processes. However, given the importance of these skills, it is imperative that news literacy be taught as an explicit applicable set rather than a disparate learning objective spread over multiple years. And this is more of that. I'm not going to read through that. And then this is a journal that the AASA puts out about equity-focused education. Let's see. It says, so this is just what the entire journal was about. Racism is about institutional power to maintain racial hierarchy. School systems are hierarchies that were originally designed to educate white males. The majority of school districts and buildings are led by white people. The focus of this paper exposes the normalization of inherent racism and institutional power structures and existing principal preparation programs. And it goes on to say that that's what this journal is about. Race work does not occur without difficult conversations. Part of this is courageous conversations. If you go to the report, it continues to talk about courageous conversations, and that's part of this initiative. And when they say courageous conversations, they're saying race work does not occur without difficult conversations. These difficult conversations needed to focus on practices, data, and the examination of personal beliefs and behaviors in relationship to race, leadership, and achievement. By studying the systemic nature of race and student achievement and the impact of white unconsciousness in the practices and preparation of school principals, the urgency to change personal and department practices became more evident. This change started with genuine reflection and long, difficult, and frustrating discussions about current department practices, personal biases, and how they perpetuate the status quo. And this is just where you can find the magazine. You can look it up yourself. It's called The School Administrator, and this is just a handful of most of them that have the same stuff in them. And this is at the end here. So this is a woman who's running for school board in her district in a completely different state. And if you go to her Facebook page, her whole goal of becoming a school board member is to fight systemic racism. And she's talking here about how excited she is that their school just adopted Learning 2025 because it's going to root out systemic racism. And then these right here, it says how to identify critical race theory in the classroom. These are words that you need to keep an eye out for. And all these highlighted words are words that were in the 33-page report or in their school administrator magazine, their journal. And I want to say that the magazine is something that goes to superintendents and people that belong to the AASA. So a huge part of the report is equity focused, and I was just trying to show when they say equity, this is what they mean by equity. They don't mean actually giving each student what they need according to their disability. They mean tying it to skin color.
Video, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this next video that you guys are going to watch, there is a mom from Pennsylvania that's also trying to get this stopped at her school district, and we've also been working closely with a lady from Georgia trying to get this stopped in her school district. So the one in Pennsylvania made this video, and I think there's so much information on it. I can share the link if you guys want, but there's going to be cited resources at the end of it. So enjoy, I guess.
AASA, the School Superintendents Association. What is their political agenda? Systematic school system redesign. This is the AASA's Learning 2025 Student-Centered, Equity-Focused, Future-Driven Education. It's recommending that there's 11 essential principles for systematic school system redesign. This talks about their plan and how they're going to include all children, the collaborative network of districts and communities. This talks about their goal and how they're going to engage teachers, administrative staff, superintendents, and boards. and in collaboration with families. This is what caught my eye. It says each school system has its own DNA. Emerging practices videos, Canvas learning management system. We actually use that in Elizabeth Forward. So right now on our iPads, the students use Canvas. What also I noticed under this section was it says case studies. So it's comprehensive case studies. Also, to be a member of the AASA, you have to pay $14,000 if you're a member for their annual participation fee. If you're not a member, you have to pay $15,400. Now, Elizabeth Forward paid $10,000 to AASA. They got $5,000 subsidized by Grable. So they only paid $5,000 to be part of their, be a member of the AASA. So where did the rest of that money go? They got a deal, I guess? They got a percentage off? Request of the superintendent. Under supports and services, it says senior consultant. Talks about how our senior consultant is going to go ahead and help within the communities to go ahead and get the superintendent any information that they need. They're the go-between between AASA and the superintendent. This talks about what more in detail of what the senior consultant will do for them. They get a total of 16 hours for a virtual discussion. What I notice is here where it says at the request of the superintendent, speaking to parents, families, and caregivers of students. So if the superintendent requests that the senior consultant come talk to us, do we get an idea what they talk about? Do we get to say no? Do we get to refuse? I really would like to know a lot more information about what it means at the request of the superintendent, what criteria he gets to be able to request that. This also talks about the senior consultant with updating up-to-date information he's going to be able to give to the network districts. What caught my eye on this one was it says, if the district requires additional consulting services, the senior consultant will be on call to recommend an appropriate individual or organization. My question is what do they consider appropriate individuals or what organization?
Albert Smith III, and he is a psychomediatrician, which is a person who is skilled in the administration and interpretation of objective psychological tests. He devises, constructs, and standardizes psychometric tests. So that under monitoring process, it goes over his information, and that he is going to be collecting data and then sharing and monitoring in order to attain the strategic goals. He's also going to be able to review existing reporting portals and report cards. And he's also going to have data for the social, emotional, cognitive, and other growth goals of the district. And he's developing and implementing a growth application program. I'm not sure if you got any information from Elizabeth Forward to inform you that this was going on, and that's concerning that we don't know that this is that in depth.
The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. If I were you as a parent, I would get very familiar with this. You are able to, and you have the right to inspect and review your child's education records that the school maintains. I would definitely, as a parent, make sure you are very familiar with this because I have a feeling we're going to need it in the near future. Institutional Review Board, also known as the IRB. This falls under the FDA regulations, and it involves biomedical research involving human subjects. The school has to abide by the IRB. So anytime they bring in any psychological testing, they need to actually give us informed consent, which means we have the ability to say no, and we need to understand everything that they are bringing into our schools to test. So it is to ensure protection of the rights and welfare of human subjects of research.
AASA Learning 2025. This is a list of commissioners, and if you notice, Bart Rocco's name is on there. He's part of the Grable Foundation as a fellow. Todd Karushkin, Elizabeth Ford's current superintendent, is also a Grable Fellow. Grable Foundation gave Elizabeth Ford $5,000 to subsidize their membership to the AASA. And it says that they have the opportunity to finally bring our schools into the future and transform them. This is operationalizing 3 core components of systematic change. And each 3 of these components, there's culture, social, emotional, and cognitive growth, and then resources. And it gives a little chart on how they plan on their outlook and how they plan on pushing their agenda. Now this is them broken down. And it says the entire system must attend to social, emotional, cognitive, mental health, and trauma-based needs. I'm pretty sure that that's the job of the parents. It also says that broadband must be deemed a public utility. It says all children must engage in high-impact early learning. And it also says that it's true that culturally responsive learning is possible. This is continued from that same section, and this is about teachers and how they want to get some diverse talent, and this is the pipeline. In order to get the teachers into the Title I, they're going to forgive student loans of educators, and if they forgive those loans, they're going to have them prioritize diversity and inclusion in the core, and they're going to have educators lead the systematic change and serve America's children. And I want you to notice that this is Appendix 8. Now this is Appendix 8, Diverse Educator Pipeline. They call it a complex endeavor, and that it should be a national objective, and that it is implement data-driven initiatives to recruit, this is about the teachers, and that they are going to need financial investment and commitment at the state and federal levels. They're going to use an aggressive recruitment effort, and they're also going to give appropriate compensation packages in that effort.
So it says that we must flip the script. That their experimentation and piloting will be necessary. And that they're going to start with experienced districts, which I will say Elizabeth Forward is known as, the first one to have the iPads to implement these apps. And it's going to be the benefit of available technologies, which our superintendent has won numerous awards for bringing in all these technologies into our school district at Elizabeth Forward.
An American imperative, a new vision for public schools. They talk about facing a series of systematic and cultural crises, confronting and overcoming long-brewing racial, economic, and social injustices. And they're achieving this level of accountability, and they want to define their roles and responsibilities in the education system. They're going to have a new vision of public schools, again, redesigning the system and re-engineering instruction. I'm not sure if anybody got notified that by their board or school that they are going to be re-engineering our instruction. And it's a multi-year transition plan. And they're going to be using case studies to design and guide schools. Now here's the big one. They're building a new system, and they have to be culturally responsive, representative, and inclusive in a world where marginalization, racism, racial and ethnic injustices, and any and all discriminatory practices are rooted out and eradicated. So they are making it the responsibilities of our educators to root out and eradicate racism, ethnic injustices, and this is where your CRT comes in, from the AASA. You better check your schools and see if they are affiliated with this. Always thank you for listening. Don't forget to keep doing your research. Don't forget.
So we just wanted to show you, we just wanted to let you know that we're not the only school that's trying to stop this, that there is a school in Georgia, and there's one in Pennsylvania, and I believe there's another one too. And there's so much information in this report. There's so much information that is questionable, and she touched on different things that we didn't even touch on, like the diverse educator pipeline. Nobody has a problem with diverse educators, but they're wanting to bring these educators in through a pipeline, and they get things like student loan forgiveness and things like that, where there's enough people in our community that want jobs. So that's another thing that people want to question. But we just wanted to show you like how embedded it is. The AASA, it is their main goal. And to think that we're implementing this into our school and the superintendent saying, well, we're not doing that part of it, that's just crazy, because that's their main initiative. It's foundational, it's essential to them. And we're one of 13 schools in the nation that are to lead the way, and we're not going to do that part of it. That's just crazy. I wanted Bruce Borders to come up and speak. He came the other night to the board meeting. We asked him to come. He met with us, a group of us parents before that. We went over to his house one night and we worked with him, and he came tonight, and we really appreciate him coming and helping us along.
Thank you. One of the things I want to share real quickly, I've dealt with so much of this garbage through the years, and I truly mean it as garbage. I'll almost guarantee you, in fact, I will guarantee you that a lot of the people that are putting this together, they're not good educators, and I'm not talking about in the Linton school system, I'm talking about on a national basis. And the bottom line is they're people who they're basically a solution looking for a problem. And I'll give you some examples here. And one of the things I might mention too, they were talking about George Floyd. Well, I've got some real life experience. I have my uncle Don Borders. He grew up in Jasonville. He was my father's older brother. He was a Golden Gloves boxer, served in the United States Army, and lived in Gary, Indiana. And we used to caution my uncle Don about his neighborhood getting rougher and rougher and rougher. And you can Google his name. I mean, I think it still probably is on there somewhere. But basically, his area, and I'm not racist in any way, shape, or form, but he was murdered by a young black neighbor. And the way that he got into a gang was to kill a white person that he knew and that he liked. My Uncle Don was literally out mowing on his lawnmower, and the neighbor shot him while he was on the lawnmower. And anyhow, when he went to trial, they asked him, well, was Mr. Borders a good neighbor? He said he was a wonderful neighbor. He brought us food all the time. He gave us apples off his apple tree, pears from his pear tree, and so forth. He says, why did you kill him? And he said, well, it was the only way I could get into the gang. And he said, well, who gave you the gun? And he said, well, it was a guy, they called him Monk or something like that, and didn't even know his name. And so my point being that, he wasn't my uncle, who was a military hero, who was a Golden Gloves boxer, who grew up right here in Jasonville. He wasn't even noticed by the news media because it didn't fit a narrative. And I can tell you that as a state representative, I've seen, I'm just going to be frank with you. I mean, I try to be loving, but I also don't pull punches. I mean, we have so many years in our budgets, we've had to bail out black schools. I mean, I'm just being frank with you. Up in the Gary school system, where they don't even have heating, they don't have cooling, the teachers aren't getting paid, they're not getting their insurance, and so as a state, we've frequently had to go in, and again, I don't mean that racist at all. The bottom line is we do that for the sake of those children. I mean, it's the bottom line. But people like Heidi's pointed out, that these people here, they would call what we're doing as racist. In fact, the fact that we went in and bailed out a number of black schools, the Gary school system being one of them, I believe in Muncie we just did one of the schools, it was labeled an act of racism that we did that. And I said, how dare you? Literally, how dare you? The bottom line is we salvaged the education of those pupils because you guys weren't doing it. You weren't even providing heating and cooling and paying the teachers and so forth. And so when I was watching this, it's disgusting to me, and you cannot allow this to take place in Linton. And I know, as Heidi has mentioned, and the bottom line is that they may not just come in, with something and say, okay, here, here's critical race theory, but it'll come in and, through the back door and so forth. And they mentioned about hate crimes. I was one of the few members of the General Assembly that refused to vote for a hate crime bill because I said, a crime is a crime. It's like when my uncle was shot. I mean, I honestly can't say that his neighbor who shot him and killed my uncle hated him. He shot him to join a gang, but the fact is he shot him. And so was the crime enough? Wasn't that enough? And so, and you can Google this, the head of the NAACP in Terre Haute, he got angry with me because I voted no on the hate crimes bill. And I said, well, why are we judging thoughts instead of actions? And he goes, well, he said, I don't even feel safe. At that time, a hate crime bill hadn't passed in Indiana. They did pass one, but I didn't vote for it. But he said, I don't even feel safe in Indiana without a hate crimes bill. I said, whoa. I said, wait a minute. I said, the bottom line is, I said, if you look at the crimes that are committed against blacks throughout the United States, 80% of them, or approximately 80%, it's black on black crime. I said, you should be more worried about what your race is doing to members of your own race. Well, the crowd that was there, very left-wing, they booed me, and I said, I don't care if you boo me or not. I said, the fact is, I'm telling you the truth. And so, when you look at this is a bunch of smoke and mirrors. I mean, they're not looking at improving education. They're not, children do not grow up inherently racist. In fact, I love, if you go into YouTube and you look at some of the interviews they've done with Denzel Washington and with Morgan Freeman, they both are very adamant that just discussing the racism on a regular basis is wrong. And they said this, no, they said they don't view America as a racist nation, and neither do I. And I've visited a number of schools in inner city Indianapolis that are some of the charter schools that, you have a wide mix of races. You have black, you have white, you have Asian, you have Indian. It's a number of races, and they get along just fine. They don't even think about race. It's just like, this is my friend, this is my friend. And the bottom line is I really respect what they're doing to put a stop to this, because this is skimmed milk masquerading as whole milk. The bottom line is that is exactly what this is. This will destroy education. And the fact of it is the fact that you've drawn awareness to it, that's probably the most shocking thing to them of all. But the fact that there's a good turnout tonight, don't let this issue stop. And I promise you, the Lord willing, that I'm back in office, I'll continue fighting at the State House, and I do. And I don't mean that I'm not one into standing up on my little pedestal and all that stuff. Anybody that knows me knows that to be true. But the bottom line is, I just, at the end of our lives, we answer to an audience of one, and I want to hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant, not that you tricked them, that you fooled them, that you lied to them. And the bottom line is, the people that are putting this kind of garbage together are not out after a better education for children. Most of them are padding their own pockets. I firmly believe that, and they're out to destroy education and to increase racism, not to abolish it, because again, children raised, and especially in a godly home, they do not grow up inherently racist, and they simply don't, and constantly talking about it is only going to increase it, not decrease it. So, thank you.
Did you want to say anything else? And then questions.
Yeah, we're going to have a moment for comment and questions. So over the course of the last week, we're about to wrap this up, you guys, but over the course of the last week, I've talked to teachers, like I said, that have been in opposition of this and that we shouldn't go forward with this, that we've done a disservice to our community. And that's kind of disheartening, because some of the teachers that I reached out to, they didn't even know what the Learning 2025 is. They said, well, give me a few days and then contact me again. And so they were in opposition at the school board meeting, not knowing what they were in opposition of. And that's very concerning. So other parents throughout the week, my daughter went to Vacation Bible Study this week, and I ran into a mom there, and she's like, I really like that you exposed this and you're talking about it. She's like, but I stand with the teachers. I trust them. It's not, we don't want to make this divisive or a polarizing subject. We just don't want this in our school system. And I hope that you guys can spread the word that we're not after teachers. So.
Also, we've had so many parents reach out to us, and obviously the goal at the board meeting was that hopefully that the initiative would be dropped, and it's not going to be that easy. They're not, from what we can tell, willing to drop it. So Hannah and Lyndon, Bill and I, we've been reaching out to attorneys and organizations, and we're going to, start working on it from that angle. But I think I had a woman tell me that she knew several parents that had decided to pull their children. Some people are wanting to homeschool, send to another school district, or send to Christian school or whatever. But if you're going to keep your kids in school, it's just something that you're going to have to, in Linton, to keep an eye out for. They're asking, what do we do? Well, you're just going to have to keep an eye out for, like she said, the after-school programs and things like that. You're just going to have to keep an eye out for what's going on, because I don't think it's going to be a quick process. I don't think it's something that they're going to be willing to drop anytime soon.
Heidi, do you have the pictures of what you taught?
Yes. Sorry, just a second. Okay, and this was actually a mom that reached out to me this week. Her daughter was in summer school this week at Linton, and this is actually a sophomore health program that they were doing at Linton. Her daughter did not get it done, so she had to go back to summer school. And her daughter sent her pictures of this from Linton this week and said, I thought that this was health class, but I just wanted to give you an example. I mean, just you have to pay attention to what they're learning.
You can read it.
Sure. So you're matching the term with the definition: gender expression, gender identity, transgender, cisgender, the inherent sense of self. So sorry, I don't know the terminology very well. It's not something that I look into. Let's see, how people communicate with their gender. I can't read all the other side. A person whose gender identity and biological sex align. A person whose gender identity and biological sex do not align. Supporting transgender peers. Gender identity, sexual orientation. They're teaching them about the LGBTQ acronym and what the words stand for: lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. The effects of bullying on LGBTQ youth. So this was taken this week at Linton Schools. So they're saying that there's nothing like this in the school. We just wanted to give an example of this is in the school.
It's important to know that is called ingenuity. That's Linton's online curriculum. So if you decided I want to send my kids to Linton, I'm going to use Linton's online program. That would be the program that they use. And the school also, if they happen to not have a licensed teacher for a subject, will also use Edgenuity during the regular school year.
Okay. Yep.
How long has Edgenuity been implemented into our educational programs?
This would probably be about 2 years, because they started Edgenuity.
We're just now hearing about it?
Edgenuity, when they did the minor academy.
Why weren't we worried about this 2 years ago?
Because the spotlight's just been brought on it right now. Yeah.
Minor academy, whenever Linton started Minor Academy, this was the first program that they went with. Now, my daughter did Minor Academy, her 8th grade year, so there wasn't anything like this in the curriculum. But she was at home and we were watching it and checking it. But this would be your high school health. If they don't have a health teacher, they will use Edgenuity as the classroom teacher subject, teaching that subject.
If this stuff isn't in the education system, how would the teachers process questions from a kid who's having these sorts of things?
I understand what you're saying.
Is there something that is
Listen.
for parents to have? Okay. Is there something for parents of
marginalized or queer children to be able to have like a health component to educate their children on the history of why they're being marginalized? And I kid you not, literally this week being threatened to be curb stomped for being gay. Is there an option for those parents to speak to their kids who are different? I know that this isn't for everybody, but it's our society, and our kids are killing themselves because they're different because of these things. What options do those parents have?
Jesus, that's what they have.
Well,
Amen.
Before we get into, before we get into our questions, I just wanted to say a few things. I probably didn't figure I needed a mic, but the way to stop this, we can't stop this with the school board. We asked the school board to come tonight. None of them showed up. There's an election in the fall. There will be 3 school board positions open. This is how we beat this. So we're going to need everyone's help at the polls this fall. This is how we take care of this. Dick, are you got a question?
No, I was going to say something. This is a national reset. This is a Biden reset. And on count, this is what the AASA is all about, is resetting the education in the United States and the world.
I would say that the majority of the room would agree with that, but even if this taught that Trump was almighty and amazing, we would still, I know, we would still have that discussion today. I know, but I'm just saying politically.
I'm talking about his socialistic program to take over the United States and the UN to take over the world.
Certainly, it's there to divide us.
I'm not talking about Trump at all.
Right.
I'm talking about Biden.
Right, but I'm just saying if we could polarize it politically, both left and right wing, even if this showed right wing, we would still be.
Is at the election in the fall and vote all the Democrats out and the conservatives in.
Now, wait a minute.
That includes you too.
I want Callie.
I just have a couple.
That's my opinion.
She's trans literature.
I do have a couple more questions coming from a lot of teachers and parents have also reached out to me. Also, hate public speaking. This is an absolute nightmare, and my reaction is crying. So I feel a lot of things, but it's anxiety. Anyways, I think at the end of the day, me as a person who has come from this community, who grew up in churches in this community, has a strong faith in our community and our teachers and what we're teaching them. Going out into the world was a shock. And this is coming from somebody who has adventured their whole life, you know what I mean? I didn't realize how narrow my scope was. Having managed teams of minorities, entire hotels opening and teaching and training people of all nationalities and religions, and I learned a lot about understanding other people. This is all this is trying to do. Anti-marginalization. Okay. I am a single soul in a crowd here, and I'm just giving you the opinion of those that I am speaking for.
Please let her talk.
Thank you. Anti-marginalization is teaching kids to not marginalize others that are different, and I guess what everybody else who I'm speaking on behalf of, so don't come at me, I can't take it. Why don't we want our kids to learn to accept other people? And why don't we want our children to learn the histories of Bruce? Great example. A black kid growing up in a hard community with a white neighbor. He was put to a task. Do you know why he followed through with that? Because he doesn't have the sociological and the community and the psychological needs that are being met, because he is in a community that's been backed off. You say black schools. Why is there a separation of communities? That's what I'm getting at. The things that we're learning about equality versus equity, it's because we don't all start from a level playing field.
I would say
and
that
kids need to understand that so that they can lead others and teach them to be better than we used to be. History is disgusting.
We can do that without $14,000 bill. I mean, we can do that.
But the kids are in schools right now threatening each other for their differences. We have
an after-school program where parents can choose. Let's go in here, let's have full transparency. You want to teach sex ed or gender studies? Absolutely. You drop your kid off to that. The problem is, why are we accommodating the 5% minority at our school whenever we can have an after-school program and we don't have to have Christian students sitting in here listening to it?
Why are we segregating programs? And
we've always had programs.
I know, but I'm saying like the 5% minority to do an after-school program, like, here, let me throw you a bone.
You know what? It sounds perfect, but for every minute that we teach that, we need to teach Christian studies. So
but
I'm good with
not
that.
Everybody that goes to our school is of a Christian faith.
Not everybody that goes to our school is
we are a
LGBTQ.
public school, and there is a separation of church and
You're
state.
separating it.
That's
not what the
has
separation's
separated church and state. And this is why. Because not everybody grows up with the same background. Not everybody has your beliefs. And bless you all. Bless everyone for their beliefs. And that is why this country is beautiful. Because we have the freedom to believe and teach and learn what we want to.
We've always had an after-school program for people who want to be involved in certain things, and I don't think that's segregating them.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, we're just teaching them further segregation.
Right, by not including
history is hard.
Yeah, and not including Christian
they need to
studies
learn it.
is separating.
You're teaching all the same thing. You're saying we're not the same, but you're wanting to teach them all exactly the same thing.
You're wanting to teach them that black is okay, Indian is okay, Mexican is okay, LGBT is okay, Christian is not. We're not going to talk about that here.
Nobody is saying that.
That's what you just said. That's what you just said.
I didn't, and it's on camera, and I would love a copy of the recording, please.
Yeah.
Nobody
said
is treating.
we're not going to teach Christian studies. I say let's make it fair and teach Christian studies with those studies.
For that. There are Jewish schools for Jewish studies.
So you want to segregate. So you're telling me you want to segregate.
I'm saying if somebody wants a religious-based educational program.
And if we want that, they can go to the after-school program.
Yeah. So
the LGBTQ can go to the after-school program.
My problem is, as a straight middle-class white woman, why are you guys saying that because we believe in
at
things?
the school board meeting, we had 5 minutes comments. If anyone has a comment, your 5 minutes are up. We'll talk with you later. Anyone else has a comment? Stand up, come to the front.
My name is Callie Smith, and I would love any following questions. I would love to sit down on an educational base of discussion and have a wholehearted.
Like I said,
The YouTube video, or Callie, I'll sit and talk with you. Let's go out there.
Anyone has a question?
Your behavior is disgusting. So is the school board. The school board got to.
Anyone else have a comment?
That's one of the reasons.
If you get a microphone, we'll be able to hear you.
We're asking you to listen to the microphone because this is being recorded, and when you're off mic, people can't hear what the question is. So just bear with us. We'll get you a mic, please.
It helps if they stand up and talk to.
I just have a question. Is the $14,000 a yearly fee?
It is.
Or was it a one-time fee?
On top of to be an AASA member, it's $2,000 or $2,500, and then the demonstration, Learning 2025 is on top of that.
So my question is, does the superintendent, because I just don't know, does the superintendent have funds that she can just write these checks for this kind of thing? Or did she go to the school board and say, here's an opportunity?
So, yes.
It's going to cost us money. The school board said, okay, you can do that.
If it's under $14,000, it does not have to be approved by the school board, so it was not approved by the school board. And also, I went and found the board minutes, and they become a Learning 2025 district last fall. I looked at the board minutes, and she never told them that she paid one dime for it. She said, we have been chosen as a Learning 2025 district, and this is a great opportunity. That was all the further it went in the minutes. She never asked them told them it cost any money or anything.
So can the school board vote her out? I mean, can the school board say, we don't want you to?
They could absolutely vote this initiative out if they wanted to, I believe. They could vote this initiative out.
Those were my only questions, is who kind of gave her the authority to do this?
So the membership is $2,000 or $2,500 a year, and then the Learning 2025 is a $14,000 on top of that. So we know that it's $16,500 a year. And then there's also professional development. There's things called there's conferences and cohorts. She's at a conference right now, and I can't remember if she got this conference free because they are a member, but a lot of these, she went to a conference in Nashville with 8 teachers, or 8 people from the school, I'm sorry, and for each extra person that goes, that costs money, not just her. So they went to a conference in Nashville in February, they're at a conference in DC right now. She went to a cohort a few months ago, I forget what state it was in, so those all cost money, yes. And no, it doesn't, from what I've looked in the board minutes, none of it's went through the board. Anybody else?
Anybody that went to the school board when they had it the other night, she kind of said how rude but you've never seen a group of people be more hateful and more rude than what the school board was to the taxpayers and the people of Linton. Matter of fact, they asked 2 or 3 taxpayers to leave the room. Want to know why they was even there, just to get out. You ain't supposed to be here. You know, and it wasn't, the board didn't do that, but the teachers did. But the board, whenever people got up and talked, like him, they were over there coughing, they were choking, I mean, it was really, to me, to see our school board, to see some, not all of them, some of our teachers are the best teachers in the world. But there's a small group that sat over there and made comments, like when Bruce was up talking, he had a couple things out of the Bible he quoted. A couple of you, we're not in church. Why are you reading the Bible? You know, so this here's the school board that we're kind of working with, and that she's working with. I mean, you've got to get anything out of them, you've got to pull about every teeth they've got, because they're not helping a bit. They've done set their claws in. They're going to teach this. One way or the other, they're going to teach this. They've done got their claws set in. Unless we do something about it, it isn't going to change.
Heidi, I got a copy of your application.
Yes.
And I had it sent to me, and I read it and went through it. And I think, I'm not positive right now, but I think that whenever they applied for this and everything, they got a $200,000 grant to have it implemented. Now, I'm not positive, but there was 3 parts of it: rigor, relevance, and relationship. Okay? The first 2 parts of it have been implemented. The rigor has, and the relevance. Now this is the relationship. And this is what the relationship is this gender, transgender, the equality, all this stuff. That is what that part of it is. Now, probably you're going to have a hard time getting it stopped on account of it's already been, parts of it have already been implemented. So I don't know exactly how you're going to do it unless you do get lawyers or some legal advice.
We're going to vote the school board out.
Well, that may not do it though, Linda.
I think it will.
No, I don't think it will because this has been implemented. They have signed into this program.
If they don't pay their $14,000 fee for the next year, will they get kicked out?
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, I mean,
Actually, the membership came due last week for the new year.
Pardon?
The membership came due last week for the new year.
Okay.
The 14,000 rolled over. They had to pay again for this year, so that just started over.
So they do have it for another year?
I'm assuming so.
Okay. But
I don't know.
that, as long as they stay in it, they're going to have to implement it. So that,
I think you're right. There's a lot of grant money and things tied to it that the school is doing now. So that's, I'm sure, one reason that they're not wanting to drop it.
Where's she getting all the money to spending all the money up here, putting on new positions and all this stuff?
I think where some of the money comes, it's called from ESSER funds, and it's
COVID relief money.
We call it COVID money. It's ESSER funds. Yep. And it's elementary, secondary school, emergency something.
Well, just as an example,
and I think that's the 200,000 you were talking about.
Schools that are receiving ESSER funds, they had to implement SEL. SEL is social emotional learning after school. Any school that received ESSER funds, they had to implement SEL at their schools. SEL is not something new. It's something that's been around for a long time, but that's why we're all hearing about it all of a sudden, because the government made them implement that to receive their COVID money. So.
Heidi, I believe, I'm not sure about this, but I believe in some of the reports that I read on their website, I believe it said maybe there was a school in Utah or something that did pull out of this and they got a refund on their money. So it is possible.
There was a school in Georgia too, yes.
If we can pull the right strings and put opposition in place, it's possible to get out of this.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. One of the things that I might mention as well, too, when you look at your school budgets, there's a great percentage of it that comes from the federal government and then that from the state government. And again, the Lord willing, I'm back in. One of the things that I can look at doing is this upcoming year is a budget year and basically look at basically each school being looked at far more closely on those types of funds to see the way that they're being spent, because quite frankly, when you're doing the budget, I mean, you're looking at over it's a 2-year biennial budget, and you're looking at over $40 billion or around $40 billion, and the vast majority of it going to K through 12 education. And so a lot of that money goes in, but there may not be that much in the budget as far as explaining about it, but as far as, this is how that money must be spent. And so we could actually put some ties on that, quite frankly, but, and it sounds like we absolutely need to. And again, a lot of that money is probably coming from the federal government as well. But one of the things that, that I might mention, there's an old adage in politics that you must be feared to be respected. And I do believe that Linda's right in that the bottom line is that these people that have not paid attention to the public about this and probably weren't even aware that it was going to become a public issue, is my guess, is that now that they feel or at least have a general belief that they may be opposed in the fall, that could be a game changer, and that could bring about a great deal of respect that may not have been there before. And again, just remember, you will not be respected until you're feared. And I'm not talking about threats, I'm talking about the bottom bottom line is this issue's been exposed, and that's the first big step. So I want to thank you all for doing that. And but the second step is I can look into it on a state level to see if there are any strings that we can attach, which we most certainly could in a budget year. And then but the bottom line is there's no question this agenda is this type of stuff, and in my opinion is satanic, and the bottom line is to try to destroy the differences in many ways between male and female, and the Bible talked about that in Romans, the first chapter, that that in the last days that would be one of the signs of the last days, and I do believe we're seeing that. But.
Bruce, since you're already standing,
sure.
If anybody else has questions, we'll stay around, but I'm sure a lot of people are wanting to go. Also, we have 20 or 25 copies of the PowerPoint if anybody wants a copy. It will be online too, but if you don't have Facebook or whatever, you can get a copy. Do you mind praying?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, we're just so thankful that, in spite of all of the warts and the bruises and so forth that we're dealing with as a nation right now, we know that this battle is not over. We know that you sent your Son, Jesus Christ, to die for our sins, that we would have life eternal. God, help us to be bold. And you tell us that you've not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Lord, guide our steps. Guide those who are putting all of this battle together. Guide each of their steps. And Lord, we just pray that not 1 second would be wasted. We just pray that you would quicken their knowledge, that you would quicken all of our knowledge, and that each of us would reach out to our community. God, give us wisdom, and Lord, give us victory in this. We know that again, you tell us that to occupy until you return, and the word that you use, Lord, we know that the Greek word that you use for occupy doesn't mean sitting back in a chair. It literally means be at war. Lord, help us to be at war until you return and to be fighting for the kingdom. Help us to fight for the eternal souls of our children and our grandchildren. Lord, we know that these evil things that are being pushed down and pushed through these school curriculums, they're designed to steal the souls of children, Lord. And God, we know there have been some great victories this week. Continue to give us victory. Lord, help us to honor you in all that we do and all that we say and all that we live. In Christ, and we ask this. Amen.
My name's Frog Jennings. I was on the school board here in Linton for 12 years, and in answer to the question about getting rid of the superintendent, I suppose it's still the same. Each year, their contract is automatically renewed unless the board says that they want to terminate it. So it's completely up to the board to say, no, we're not renewing your contract from here on. So that is possible.
Thank you.